Today's lesson is about the discriminant. So we're going to be talking about a value that will help us determine some information about the graph and the solutions to the graph. In using the discriminant, today what we're going to do is we're going to investigate it by calculating b squared minus 4ac. When we calculate b squared minus 4ac, we've got our a, b, and c values. So in this case, it's going to be 1 squared, and we want that 1 in parentheses because this will always be positive, minus 4 times 2 times negative 5. And in this case, it's 1 minus the negative gives us plus. 1 plus 40 is 41. So for number 2, the value of the discriminant is 41. At this point, if you're just getting this for the first time, if you don't have the worksheet, then maybe look on Blackboard for it and copy these problems down. Determine the value of the discriminant, pause the video, and we'll come back and check our answers. Okay, so now that we have the values of the discriminant, we're going to talk about some of the easier parts of it. For 25, that is a positive number. 2 is a positive number. We get number 3, a value of 20, which is positive. And then the rest of this column is pretty clear to fill out. But what this number tells us is it tells us the number of solutions. Now we're going to try and fit a lot of information in this box, but if you get a positive value as your discriminant, you can graph all of these on the graphing calculator and see that this graph crosses in 2 spots. Okay, if you want, you can graph this, but we see that it crosses the x-axis in 2 spots. Anytime we have a positive value, it's going to cross the x-axis in 2 spots. If the discriminant is 0, as we talked earlier in the warm-up, then we have 1 solution, but we call it a double root. And we know anytime we get a double root, it's a rational solution. Now, anytime we get a negative, okay, and we already know this, that this b squared minus 4ac is going to end up underneath a radical symbol, and we can't take the square root of a negative number. So we can say either 1 is no real solution, which that's fine, or we could even be a little bit more specific and say 2 imaginary solutions. So in each one of these situations, 7 and 8, we have a negative discriminant, so it's 2 imaginary solutions. Or again, like I said, you could say no real solutions as well. Okay. One thing about these 2 solutions up here when it's positive, when we look at this, at number 1, we ask ourselves, can we factor this? Is there something that multiplies to give us negative 4 and adds to give us 3? And the answer to that is yes. This is factorable. The other thing is, though, this 25, because it's a perfect square, tells us that this is factorable. If it's factorable, we're going to get 2 rational solutions. If your number like 41, you cannot take the square root of it easily, okay, and it's irrational. So it'll have 2 irrational solutions. The same thing with 20. We're eventually going to take the square root of this because it's part of the quadratic formula, and we get 2 irrational solutions. So looking at the information from the chart above, we're going to start defining a few things. So the expression on the radical symbol, the expression under the radical symbol in the quadratic formula is called the discriminant. It is used to find the number, and we're going to edit this to say, and type of solutions in a quadratic function. So we're going to check the b squared, and that should be b squared minus 4ac, is greater than 0. In other words, the value is positive. Then it has 2 real solutions. Now, real is a big umbrella that covers both rational and irrational. If the positive number is a perfect square, like 25, then we can solve by factoring. And we're going to get 2 rational solutions. If the positive number is not a perfect square, then we solve by either completing the square, which I'm going to abbreviate with CS, so completing the square, or quadratic formula. And we're going to get two irrational solutions. We're going to check b squared minus 4ac, and if we get 0, then the equation has one double root, and it's the vertex of the parabola. And that double root we know is rational. Okay, it can be written as a fraction. If we check b squared minus 4ac and it's less than 0, which means that's a negative number, then the solution has no real solutions. Or we can say two imaginary solutions. All right, on the other sheet, or the back of the sheet, is a chart. This chart here is an abbreviation of what we just discussed. So it's going to summarize the other side of our paper. So again, just to reiterate, if we have the value of a discriminant is a positive perfect square, we have two rational solutions. If it's positive and not a perfect square, we have two irrational solutions. When we sketch the graph, we know it's going to cross the x-axis. So this actually, both of these, if it's positive, we can have a graph that goes like this. We could have a graph that opens down and crosses in two spots. We know it crosses in two spots. And unless you get a hint that they're rational numbers, then we can determine the zeros or whatever. But that's what a positive discriminant will look like graphically. If the discriminant is 0, the value of the discriminant is 0, we have one double root, which is rational. Graphically, we're just going to graph quadrants 1 and 2 for space purposes. Graphically, it's going to look like it bounces off the x-axis. Okay? If your discriminant is negative, then we have there's two ways to say this, two imaginary solutions or no real solutions. Graphically, it's not going to cross the x-axis anywhere. So it's just going to be either opening down in quadrants 3 and 4 or opening up in quadrants 1 and 2. It could be either way. So when we find the value of the discriminant, it can tell us what type of solutions we have, and those types of solutions can tell us how to solve the quadratic, and it can tell us a little bit about the graph. So the discriminant can be an important number to know. So here we've got some examples, and this is what your assignment's going to look like tonight. You're going to find the value of the discriminant, and when you find the value of the discriminant, then you're going to check one of these boxes that applies. So in this case, when we find b squared, we're going to find negative 12 squared minus 4 times a times c. Now you can take a minute, pause the video, and calculate that. We know that this is 0. If we get the value of 0, we have one double rational root. Okay? When we calculate this value, b squared minus 4ac, we get negative 2 squared minus 4 times a times c. We're going to end up getting a positive value. It's not a perfect square. You can pause the video and calculate that, and then determine what type of solutions you're going to get. So we calculate this number as 280. And 280 is not a perfect square, but it is it's positive, so we have two different irrational roots. Once you calculate the discriminant for the third example, we get 49, which is a positive perfect square. With a positive perfect square, we're going to have two different rational roots. In the last example, we calculate the discriminant and we get negative 32, which with negative, then we have no real roots, or in other words, 2 imaginary roots. So you're going to go ahead and do the practice on the discriminant to determine what type of solutions you get based on your discriminant.